Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to our Monday episode of The Niche Cast. We're from theniche-case.com, where you can check in with a whole lot of Aotearoa sporting matters. We always pop up on a Monday morning to drop a podcast for you about Aotearoa sport, and then we'll get busy into writing about a lot of the stuff we have seen over the weekend. Big up yourself. Hope you're enjoying the absolute plethora of Aotearoa sport. So many national teams in action at the moment, which is really fun as well. And of course, because today is a Monday, this will be accompanied with a newsletter dispatch via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. That comes out every Monday and Friday. That's just a Kiwi Sports newsletter. It's just what you need every Monday and Friday evening. You can also use the Substack as a paid Substack option to support the Niche Case straight up the guts. We'll deliver our subscriber podcast on Wednesday. That will also come out for the Patreon whānau, so you can check out Patreon or a paid Substack subscription to support the Niche Case and donate directly to the Niche Case. Of course, we've also got a Buy Me a Coffee link as well if that's your go-to. Otherwise, your presence here with us, it's all good. It's enough. How about that for some mindfulness? It is enough, but we do need some official mindfulness, mate. What do you got?
Well, I'm still working off my Gnostic Gospels here, and this one comes from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, who I don't know if he said it. I don't know who said it. I assume it's probably Gnostic Jesus again. It's like last time. I'm not going far back enough as to see who started the quote, but the quote here goes: "Pity the body that leans upon the soul. Pity the soul that leans upon the flesh." You gotta have a bit of both, don't you? You gotta have the spiritual, but you still gotta have the grounded in reality version, because we didn't get stuck into bodies for nothing.
There we go. I don't need to add any explanatory notes there. You did a nice job summarizing, but I've got no idea what the Gnostic gospel is. Like, you say that like it's a regular, even for someone like me, like it's a regular mindfulness practice, whatever. But I've got no idea what it is. What is
I
Gnostic
don't know if it's
gospel?
that. I don't know if it's that regular. I only said it like it was a regular thing because I quoted it last time, but I don't know if I explained it last time. I don't know. It's the books of the Bible that didn't get put in the Bible because the Catholic
Yeah,
Church was trying to streamline things into having like a consistent vision that fitted their quest for power, if you understand what I mean. And so there was a bunch of stuff that was just like, nah, that's not happening. If you have that book, it's illegal. If you have this book, it's allowed. The establishing of power and the like unifying of the church kind of process. Whereas like the first couple hundred years of Christianity, apparently it was just kind of like anything goes. You pick your flavor of the week, and that's what your particular church does. um and yeah, they found a bunch of these like excised, banned, censored texts, like 100 or 200 years or something ago, in like a cave in Egypt, something like that, one of them countries. And yeah, they've been translated, and a few of them have found their way.
yeah. I do remember.
Interesting historical context as well as interesting religious context. It's a weird one. I think that's why I find it kind of fascinating.
Yeah, well, one would assume it's a bit more like all of religion's a bit airy fairy, but it is the stuff you're saying, the stuff you're sharing with us now is a bit too airy fairy for the
Yeah,
right. I gotcha.
yeah, and a little bit like inconsistent with some of the ideas around like resurrection and stuff like that. I think was a big issue. Yeah, I
Right.
think the Gnostics, what I find, seem to be a little bit more like closer to the sort of let it be Buddhist kind of way of thinking, but I certainly am not qualified to be to be speaking with authority on that.
I don't know. We do a lot of mindfulness, so I'd say we're as
Yeah,
qualified
okay,
as.
maybe that's. I've got a degree in mindfulness.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Fun weekend of sport. Obviously, we don't really discuss rugby union too much, but there was a bit of fun rugby to be had. Good rugby, I'd say. The All Blacks defeating Ireland, top level rugby, and the quarterfinals of the World Cup have just finished. France lost to South Africa. England defeated Fiji. All Blacks defeated Ireland, and there was another game.
Argentina beat Wales.
Yeah, so it was a fun weekend of rugby union. Any thoughts on the All Blacks? Because I'll get your juices flowing. I did write this for the news that are coming out tonight. Like, I do think at this stage of the World Cup, like, every team has elite rugby union things. They've all got at least 3 kickers. The All Blacks, I don't know, Ardie Savier's had some really good kicks in this World Cup, including the chip and chase and the loss to France. Then he had a good clearing kick against Ireland. So he's another kicker. But every team's got like 4 or 5 kickers. Every team's got great loose forwards. Every team's good at scrummaging. Every team's good at lineouts. Every team can maul. Every team's got hard runners. Every team's got shape. I did talk about the Irish attacking shape, and they were able to do some Warriors things, but I think the most the New Zealand Warriors thing they did was using their shape to then get the space on the outside. Because if you got all the shape in the middle, the defensive line condenses and you got the space out wide. So they were doing a bit of that. But at this stage of the World Cup, like, every team's good at rugby. Every team is powerful. Like, every team just ticks every boxes. The All Blacks have Richie Mo'unga, though. And he's a first 5 who runs the footy. And he's fast, he's got good footwork, as well as all the other skills. Good pass, good kicking. And I think that is a point of difference that I am pondering, because a lot of the other first 5s at the Rugby World, at the quarterfinal stage at least, they're more of the Johnny Sexton type. You know, whether it's Pollard, whether it's Dan Biggar, or any of these other chaps. Like, they are more typical number 10 rugby union, first 5, kick it, good passing, organisation, where I think Richie Mo'unga has a point of difference for the All Blacks with his speed and running the footy at the first receiver number 10 slot, which then poses a threat to all the inside defenders. He had a line break against Ireland where he dummied on the inside, but he's fast enough with good feet to get through the line. He is really good at rugby, and I think he is at a stage of the tournament where every team is good. Every team has elite rugby union things. Somehow the All Blacks and Richie Mo'unga still have a little point of difference. And we won't need to worry about France anymore because they lost, but they do have a similar point of difference with Dupont at the halfback position, because he does all the same things, but from the ruck. So he's a playmaker, he's a runner, he's a creative force from the ruck. So again, going back to the Warriors, like, that's Wade Egan. But I think a better comparison for Dupont is Harry Grant, where the whole attacking system starts at the ruck and you need to be engaged at that point. So that's a bit of a point of difference for France, but we don't need to worry about them anymore. So I think just highlighting the Mo'unga and the point of difference he offers at first 5 compared to the other first 5s is really interesting, and just something I really enjoyed against that Irish rugby union team.
Yeah, weird old Rugby World Cup, because aspects of it have been fantastic. I think, like, the strength of some of the weaker teams is as good as it's ever been. Like, Portugal beating Fiji was a big drama, and then Fiji still, you know, Fiji themselves being a team where you can say, oh, they lost a game, therefore it's an upset. That's a development as well, because they knocked Australia out, didn't they? And then that hilarious thing where Australia needed Fiji to lose to Portugal, which no one thought would happen, in order for Australia to get through on points differential. And it did happen, but they didn't lose by enough. So Australia was still out. Funny situations there. But also, it's like, and, you know, some of the games have been fantastic too, from the small amount of it that I've watched, but maybe I'm picking on the games that were sort of the more watchable ones, but it's been some very, very good sporting activities there. But at the same time, it's also like 5 weeks into the tournament and we've just reached the quarterfinal stage. I don't think it's their fault that, like, I don't think it's their fault that the 2 semifinals were played in the quarterfinals. 4 best teams happen to meet each other in the quarterfinals. So I think that's just, that can happen anytime with a draw like that. That's just seeding isn't always fair in how those things work out. Um, but it did seem to take a very long time to get around to this, and there was like, games on weekends and then weeks off, and it just seemed to drag on. Like not the organization of the event, which has been real good and well supported by France, but the organization of like the draw and the setup of it was kind of weird. And I think we're seeing similar things in the Cricket World Cup, although what the Cricket World Cup has done really well is at least they've got that thing going, which football does perfectly in their World Cups. Just to have a game every day. Like, just stay in the news cycle constantly, always something happening. You don't have to cram everything in. If someone wants to go absolutely crazy and watch everything, they somehow can. It's not easy, but you can if you really want to. But yeah, I don't know. It's the other aspect of it, I guess, is that it was this thing where like the narrative was, here's when the Northern Hemisphere teams are going to really take over, and there's one of them in the semi-finals. didn't quite happen. How that, especially like Argentina beating Wales, is two fairly even teams, so it goes. Wales aren't as good as they have been in the past. Argentina are pretty solid. They've, I think they did beat the All Blacks a little while ago, fairly recently, Argentina. So there you go. But like South Africa and New Zealand both coming up against the two teams that people probably thought were the favourites or the most exciting teams, the big emerging teams, France and Ireland, and then just like grinding them out with really solid backs to the wall, in particular defensive performances, particularly the later stages, the last few minutes defending, withstanding what the other team had to give. Is like the two powerhouses, the two traditional long-time, all-time powerhouses of international rugby, just coming through in the clutch as they do in all these tournaments. Usually, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Well, England, like, respect England. They're also a powerhouse of
former winner, of course, and they're in the semi-finals. They're the only Northern Hemisphere team to have won it, and they're the only Northern Hemisphere team still in this edition.
There you go. The reason you're poo-pooing the Rugby League World Cup is the Rugby World Cup is the reason I love it. Like, it goes on and on and on. It doesn't stop. You just get high quality rugby dished up to you every weekend, and you can't play multiple games a week of test rugby. Like, that's impossible for these athletes to do.
You can spread it out the days, not having 3 games on a Saturday, 3 games on a Sunday, then nothing for 3 days. But yeah, I accept that is different than other sports where it's harder to turn around. Yeah,
like, these things just balance each other out, because the Cricket World Cups are borderline shambles. Like, let's be honest, it's just the typical BCCI stuff, and you compare like I was interested. There was that India defeated Pakistan, so then Mickey Arthur comes out, Pakistan coach, and he's talking about, it felt like a BCCI event instead of an ICC event. And like, yeah, sure, sour grapes, you lost to your arch rivals, blah, blah, blah. But every World Cup game looks like a World Cup event. FIFA World Cup games, the whole thing is presented like a FIFA World Cup event. This is not New Zealand football hosting a game.
Yeah, no, this is FIFA hosting a game in New Zealand.
And both of those tournaments, pretty big crowds for neutral games. You're not getting big crowds in India for neutral games.
Yeah,
like, that's not happening. And like I think the Cricket World Cup is the least. Like, we've had a lot of World Cups. Like, we've got a lot of international sport and national teams in action at the moment, so you can compare and contrast all these World Cups. But the Cricket World Cup, apart from some cool results and the Blackcaps, I'd say is the least interesting World Cup from a like holistic perspective. How it's organized, how it's run, conditions. Like, these dudes are losing liters of sweat every game. It looks more like it feels a bit more like the last football World Cup, the men's World Cup in Qatar, where it's like, the sport's cool, the events are World Cup, but it's also a shambles as far as like just compared to the other World Cups we've had. So like, I find it's pretty funny. Like, women's football games in New Zealand and Australia were put in record crowds for the host nations and neutral games. look at some of the neutral games in this Cricket World Cup in a country that supposedly loves cricket, and you're not getting the same environment, you're not getting the same atmosphere. So that is a win for Aotearoa hosting the Women's World Cup, the games that were hosted in Aotearoa, and the Women's World Cup and the Rugby World Cup. I can't really split them at this stage. Like, they're both really high quality events, and I'm enjoying both of them. But let's get into some Blackcaps, because I don't think we've talked since they defeated Bangladesh. That happened at the end of last week. Blackcaps restricted Bangladesh 245 for 9, and then they scored 248 for 2. We've had, England, funnily enough, they lost to Afghanistan, so who would have thunk it?
A moment silent for the English cricket team.
No, fuck them. Who cares? And Sri Lanka are probably going to defeat Australia as well. Of course, the Blackcaps, now they face Afghanistan on Wednesday night, so that'll be pretty interesting. Just one thing, because we've talked a lot about how good the Blackcaps are at rolling through tournaments, adapting to conditions and opponents. I've had a few examples to compare and contrast. Like the much of the storyline from the Pakistan batting innings was how they didn't adapt to the conditions and kind of settle for a 250 score. England, the storyline coming out of that game is, why are England just still trying to whack the ball in conditions that are pretty hard to score runs in? What do the Blackcaps do? They just stay present in the moment, in the one game they're playing, and they always put up a competitive score. They always make subtle changes to their bowling and their batting and how they're going about the game to ensure they are in the contest. And what do you know? They're 3-0. And they don't lose to any minnow nations like England, who always seem capable of being upset. But it's just like the last weekend, there's been 2 clear examples where teams have not adapted to conditions. They haven't altered their plans. They haven't tinkered with how they're going to operate. That is exactly what makes the Blackcaps so good in major tournaments. And we've seen like Lockie Ferguson's taken wickets now. He's a fast bowler who can play any sort of role for the Blackcaps in their bowling attack. Trent Boult, Matt Henry, vastly experienced. They've got all sorts of tricks, all sorts of deliveries they can offer. And then you look at the batting, like Daryl Mitchell can do literally anything. He averages over 50 in tests and ODIs. He can hit you down the ground. He can reverse sweep you. He can sweep you. That goes for most of the Blackcaps batters. And it's like their individual skill sets can all be deployed in different ways to... So how about this? It's one thing to say we're going to adapt and we're going to just change our path in this innings slightly. Can your players execute that skill of adapting? Because I know Daryl Mitchell, he can change how he's batting. I know Devon Conway can do it. I sure as hell know Kane Williamson can do it, right? Like, I trust Trent Boult can do it. These dudes have done it for a long time. The whole squad's done it for a long time when you think about the Blackcaps' sustained World Cup success. So it's one thing to be like, yeah, we're going to adapt. But can you execute your adaptation?
Yeah, which goes in a few different ways as well, because they're adaptable in how they can adapt, if that makes sense. Like, we haven't seen Tim Southee yet. He's still out injured from an injury that was suffered very late in a month before the tournament began. And it's right in that tricky. If that happened a week before the tournament, you'd have to say, well, unfortunately, you're out of the tournament now. You're not going to be able to play. If it happened 3 months earlier, no dramas. This time to recover. You'll be sweet by the time. It's right in that little awkward spot where you don't quite know if he's going to be like good to go or what, or, is he going to be ready for the first game? He wasn't ready for the third game. Should be ready for the fourth game by the sounds of it. It sounds like he was pretty close to playing the last time. They just, I guess when Lockie Ferguson is starting to look a bit more like himself again, you get a little bit more leeway in when to bring him back, same as they had with Kane Williamson. A little bit more leeway because Rachin Ravindra comes in and bats awesome. But like Williamson as well, the captain, the talisman of the team, misses the first couple games, comes back in the third game and breaks his thumb, and now was going to miss a few more games. Like that's chaotic stuff. How have England gone without Ben Stokes? You know, who was picked, came out of retirement, decides, oh, yeah, I want to play. And they're like, well, I guess we can't pick Harry Brook then. And then they decide, well, and actually, we are going to pick Harry Brook. We're just going to drop Jason Roy. Ben Stokes, you're back in. We love you. Unfortunately, you're injured and haven't played in the first 3 games, and 2 of them have been embarrassing defeats. That's not great, you know. Like that's an example of struggling to adapt. The Blackcaps, a lot of teams would like, what would Pakistan do, who have already had one troublesome game and a couple of good performances in there as well, but the one troublesome game against India, it's like, well, what if Babar Azam had been injured for the first couple, comes back, breaks his thumb? Like that's chaos for Pakistan. You know, they wouldn't recover from that. The Blackcaps can handle the fact that Kane Williamson might only play 1 game in the group stage of this tournament. He might get back for a couple more towards the end of things. But he's not going to play the next couple, certainly. And he's out, he's back, he's out again. Like it's difficult to do that. And you're working with guys who aren't in amazing form in 1 or 2 cases. Ferguson was an obvious example coming in, just his lack of wickets in recent times. Santner as well was also someone who'd struggled for wickets in the last couple of years, but he's been absolutely brilliant with the ball so far this tournament. He might just be the Blackcaps' like best performing bowler so far, including not only has he taken some wickets, but he's bowling more economically than he usually does, except for the one time when he didn't, he took even more wickets. Went for like about, I don't know, 6 and over or something in that in the second game against Netherlands, wasn't it? But he took what, 4 or 5 wickets, I think, in that one. Like these dudes are, Will Young has to adapt to playing as an opener. Then he gets dropped because Ravindra does so well, and now although whether that's a dropping or whether that's tournament rotation it would have remained to be seen. Now it doesn't matter because he's just going to come back in like they started because Williamson's out. Like there's a lot of shuffling going on there, which they've handled really well with 3 emphatic performances, 3 really good wins. 2 of them were against teams they were expected to win, but they won them in ways where it was like they didn't give the other team a sniff. Like Bangladesh and Netherlands never looked like they had a chance of doing anything special. Whereas like that Afghanistan-England game started off with fella Gurbaz just smacking boundaries all over the place. He was on track to score like a 60-ball 100, and then his captain ran him out for 80, and he was furious. He was swinging his bat around and all sorts. But yeah, the Afghanistan were like 80 without loss after about like 7 overs or something. Like it was probably not that much. It was probably more like 9 or 10 overs. They were smoking things. Like that wasn't England looking in control from the start. It was like there were signs from the very beginning that there was something wobbly going on there. They got Gurbaz balled. I saw someone saying that. I respect it. Blackcaps, no dramas, you know. Blackcaps just can come in with guys who maybe like as another example. Australia got some dudes out of form, got some dudes where it's like we're not 100% sure how the ODI team's looking here going into the World Cup, and they've struggled with it. Blackcaps had similar things, and they rose to the occasion. You know, there's a long way to go yet, but this is the identity of this team when it comes to tournament cricket. This is why they're so good at it, is because they do these kind of things. They don't get rattled, and they've had a lot to be rattled by with the injuries at this tournament. Hasn't affected them.
Do you remember what Kane Williamson did in Test cricket last summer?
He's got at least 100 because I remember him at the last. He scored a double 100 in December or something, didn't he? And then kept his streak of consecutive years with a century going. I remember that much. It was like right at the end of the year, he hadn't played much, and then he comes in and gets like, I think it might have been a double 100. And I think he scored at least another ton since then.
I don't know if he might have hit a century in Pakistan, but the summer in New Zealand, he had 3 consecutive centuries in Test cricket.
Okay, so
which
better
is
than I remembered.
Also really good. Then he comes back from his knee injury. He hits 54 not out, and then the 37 was basically not out because he retired in 2 warm-up games. Then he gets 78.
He's retired hurt in 3 consecutive games now, isn't he? Just score enough runs, walk off. Only one of them was an official game that counts for stats.
Well,
but,
for all the scorers, there's a difference between retired hurt, retired not out.
That's true.
So 54, 37, 78 not out. Coming back from the knee injury after 3 consecutive centuries in the Test summer. Like he's, I'm going to check what he did in Pakistan as well. Let's go his Test match list. Pakistan, 200 not out. There you go. So last summer he hit 2 double centuries, and then he got a bung knee. Then he came back, scored more runs, got a bung thumb, probably going to score more runs. Trent Boult, 2023. What ranking out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 years of cricket. Where does 2023 rank for ODI bowling as far as lowest average? And I think we can go strike rate as well.
Definitely top 3 because he hasn't played a lot, but he's taken wickets pretty much whenever he's played, and I think he's had 1 or 2 big ones, big hauls. Let's say second.
Second was 2015. This is his 3rd best year of ODI bowling. First was last year.
Okay, so 2 of those 3 years were World Cup years as well.
Yep,
2015 and 2023.
He averaged 23.9 in 2019. So Kane Williamson doesn't stop scoring runs, and he just hit 2 double centuries last summer, 3 consecutive Test centuries. He's in a really career best kind of zone. Trent Boult's delivered 2 of his best years of ODI bowling in 2022 and 2023. So not only do you have everything you've explained with how they're juggling the chaos, their best players are playing their best cricket, which seems quite important, and especially important when you compare it to the White Ferns, who their best players aren't playing their best cricket. Well, Amelia Kerr's playing her best cricket.
Except for Amelia Kerr, yeah.
She scores runs. The White Ferns finished their T20 series against South Africa. They had 3 washed out T20s. Then they won the 4th game and they lost the 5th game. So they finished that series 1-1. They lost the ODI series. Amelia Kerr is in fantastic form. She is undoubtedly the team's best batter. So everyone needs to tinker with their Susie Bates, Sophie Devine stuff going on there. It's Amelia Kerr. Amelia Kerr scores all the runs. She is the Kane Williamson of women's cricket in New Zealand. That is a fact. But everything else is a bit iffy. Like Molly Penfold did come in. She did take a few wickets, so shout out to her because she hasn't taken many wickets elsewhere. But you remember, like a few weeks ago, I was talking about the spin guru for the White Ferns. So that was on the back of the ODI series with the spinners, Amelia Kerr. There is a difference between Amelia Kerr, the batter, Amelia Kerr, the bowler. Amelia Kerr, Eden Carson, and Fran Jonas were a bit underwhelming in the ODIs. Well, they combined for 1 wicket in the T20s. Eden Carson and Fran Jonas didn't take a wicket. Eden Carson, Devine, and Jonas didn't take a wicket in the T20s. They all conceded at least 7 RPO. So the young spinners aren't getting better under the spin guru. That also needs to be put out there as a fact. Like they're not taking wickets. But apparently the spin guru was helping them take wickets. He's not anymore. And to the point of not taking wickets, how about this? The White Ferns chose to bowl first in both T20 games. 172 for 4, South Africa. And then South Africa scored 155 for 5. So choosing a bowl first, you take 4 wickets, then you take 5 wickets. While South Africa score over 150 runs. New Zealand chased it down, then they couldn't chase it down. But if you're going to choose to bowl first, you might want to take some wickets. right? Like just or
It stands to reason, yeah.
or you just want to like dominate the run chase because you're Virat Kohli or you're any other run chasing supremacy team player. Well, they might do it, they might not. So the White Ferns, it's a pity there were 3 washed out games here because you couldn't really take too much away from the series. They did put up 111 for 9, batting first in the second game before the second innings was washed out. So that wasn't great either. It's all just super underwhelming for the White Ferns. Like, the only player getting better is Amelia Kerr, while her bowling gets kind of worse. Sophie Devine hasn't taken a wicket in T20s this year, which is the first year she has bowled and not taken a wicket since her debut in 2006. And there's still weird selections, like players aren't playing, players are playing. They've used 4 different wicket keepers in the last year. And they just don't really win, which is... yeah, it's all the same. And I just find it quite interesting how this White Ferns team under coach Ben Sawyer is exactly the same as it was under Bob Carter. Some of the players have changed. The coaches have changed. There's different kind of styles. But the results, as far as the individual performances and the performances of the team, exactly the same, which is super weird.
Well, Bob Carter still is hanging around in a sort of upper management level, isn't he? So perhaps they need to get rid of the head selector as well as the coaching change they've already done. In contrast, the Blackcaps have, I think it's taken 28 out of a possible 30 wickets at this in 3 completed ODIs so far, and they've lost 10 of their own, which is massive. I don't know that anyone does wicket differential. I don't know if that's a stat that even holds up because of the fact that you could you could score 350 for 9 and then the other team scores 340 for 1. You've lost 8 more wickets, but you've won the game, so who cares? But that, as far as the Blackcaps go, considering they've won all 3 of those games, I think that stat stands up pretty well. And then there's like when you're talking about Devine having her worst year of bowling, which was pretty noticeable as well. And some of the, like, she got tonked a little bit against in the 5th T20, was the 5th T20, which was also the 2nd T20. I think she went for a few runs in that one as well. From what I remember, I was looking at the scorecard before. In contrast, like, one of the big stories, one of the big talking points about Trent Boult so far at this World Cup has been how he's added this knuckleball to his arsenal. It's like he's 33, 34, 35. I don't know how old he is, but he's probably at his last World Cup, and he's bringing out new tricks. And he's talked about how it's taken him a couple years to develop it. It wasn't just something he just decided to start trying. It's something he's worked on for a long time, trying to upskill, like continually trying to upskill the latter stages of his career. And I did see something else as well, talking about like how he's a swing bowler. He's always been unreal with the new ball in ODI cricket from this. Pretty much, I think 2015 was about when the 2015 World Cup was about when he first got in the team full time. And he was instantly brilliant. Like, he's taken top order wickets. That's what he's always done throughout his career. But he hasn't always been such a good middle over bowler, and he hasn't always been such a good death bowler. He's probably, I don't want to say he's not as good at the start in the first power play as he used to be. I think that's just he's bowling in conditions that are much tougher for him to be able to do that right now, and hasn't played a lot of other cricket for the Blackcaps recently. But he's as good as he's ever been in the middle overs, and particularly I think in the death overs. That little knuckleball certainly helped that. Like, there's a dude who is one of the best ever to do it, continuing to add to his game at a time where he has nothing left to prove. He's still trying to get better and better and better. And I think, I'm not saying Sophie Devine is not doing that. I'm just saying that it's not working. She's had a few struggles. So Susie Bates has not been as consistent recently. And that has exposed what we already knew was the case with the White Ferns, which is that they rely very heavily on their best couple world-class players to If they do well, they win. If they don't do well, they lose. And that's at the moment, none of them are taking wickets with the ball, those bowlers. So it's really about whether they can chase down totals or not. That's kind of the only thing they got going for them. And it worked one game, it didn't work the other game.
The Kiwi Ferns, they had a loss to the Australian Gillaroos, 16-10. And it's a kind of working through a couple of different ideas. You'll know as well as I do that anytime you have a team with younger players or players who are new to that arena, your chances of winning decrease. And it's something that I've thought about because it seems like every test the Kiwi Ferns play, there are debutantes. Because there are new players playing NRLW, there are other players who aren't playing NRLW. And basically, to play for the Kiwi Ferns at this stage, you need to be playing NRLW and you need to have that level of competition behind you to get into the Kiwi Ferns because all the Gillaroos play NRLW, right? So to compete, you need to have that same level, that baseline level of competition. But it's really hard to defeat Australia with debutants because, as we're seeing, international sport, especially when you're playing against the best or when you're in the biggest tournaments or, Blackcaps at the World Cup, it's a different level of intensity and competition. So when I thought about this when I was watching the Kiwi Ferns, like when you're playing against the Gillaroos, and they were saying how most of the Gillaroos, like starting 13, were in the NRLW team of the year and that type of thing. So you've basically got the best players in NRLW all with exceptional line speed. So how are you going to do what you want to do as a new player to International Rugby League when you're coming up against players who win World Cups, who have performed for the Gillaroos for a number of years? And that was much of the first half. I actually saw some similarities between the Wellington Phoenix Women and the Kiwi Ferns in the first half of the Kiwi Ferns game, where it was just like nervous energy, and I was watching both games. I was like, yo, just calm down. Like, you just need to pass the ball to your teammate. You don't need to, because what was happening was they were passing it over their heads. They were passing it behind them. They were doing all this crazy stuff. And you're like, just calm down and just, just do what you need to do, as opposed to going like a lot of nervous energy, frantic, chaotic energy. And I think the Kiwi Ferns were down 16-4 at halftime. Anessa Biddle scored a nice try off a Racing McGregor kick, but the Gillaroos were on top. They were dominating the game. And then the Gillaroos didn't score a point in the second half. And Mele Hufunga scored an absolute crazy try where she did a Roger Tuivasa-Shepp broken ankle step and then did like a Conrad Hurrell steamroller run.
That's quite a combination.
That's the third. Mele Hufunga is the hardest player to tackle in Women's Rugby League. She is fantastic. And her rise through rugby league has been extraordinary in less than a year, pretty much, because November last year she made her debut for the Kiwi Ferns at their World Cup, which you would have loved because it was a far shorter World Cup due to the number of teams playing. It's like less than 1 month as opposed to bordering on 2.
It's not so much the length; it's the number of off days in the Rugby World Cup that was the issue. The fact that it took 5 weeks to get towards. Yeah, well, that's the consolation, is that that's why it can make up for it. But like a football World Cup is done in 4 weeks.
Yeah, you're just running around a football field. You're not smashing into like 100 kg people. Right? It's a vastly different. Even cricket, like you're sweating a lot. It's hard work. Football's hard yakka. There's no physical contact. Like the physical contact, you do need a bit of rest and recovery.
Except for Kane Williamson's thumb is the exception to the rule there.
Well, he might be the best rugby player in the Blackcaps, so it does make sense that he's doing a lot of contact injuries.
You reckon? Well, I reckon Tom Latham would be a good rugby player.
Well, he did play. I think he did play first 15. Tim Southey played first 15 as well. But
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I think Kane Williamson was Richie Mo'unga. He was first five. You know, he's got a bit of
I
flair, a
could
bit of
believe
skill.
that. He seems
I
like the AB de Villiers type who's just good at everything he does.
Off the top of my head, I think Tom Latham was a front rower. He might have been a hooker, and he might have played in alongside old Walsh, Tom Walsh. So you got, so you might
Oh
have
yeah, yeah. Well, he did play rugby. Yeah, that's true.
you might have Tom Latham and
Big
Tim
unit.
Southey as rugby forwards, and then you've got Kane Williamson as the playmaker, which makes sense.
Southey's got to be a lock, surely.
Yeah, it was a lock number six type of geezer. So Kiwi Ferns, Mali Hofunga, Kiwi Ferns debut, player team of the tournament, the World Cup. She's basically top three for line breaks, tackle breaks, and tries in NRLW, her first season of NRLW. Then she scores an absolutely crazy try for the Kiwi Ferns. So second half, Kiwi Ferns score that try. Jillaroos don't score another try. Game finishes 16-10, and it's a really gritty performance from the Kiwi Ferns. The debutants were all pretty solid. It's just hard. It's hard to expect a win over Australia if you do have your whole bench making their debut, let alone other players who did dominate NRLW making their debut. But that's Test footy. This is what we're saying. Test footy, international sport, the highest level. It's a different game because the other team are all best in class type of talents. But there's a bit of mana in that. There's a bit of like they grit through tough patches. They made really important tackles, covering tackles. RP Nichols made an awesome tackle. They just kind of settled in a set for set grind with Australia, and it was really impressive. And there's foundations to build upon, especially like the class of RP Nichols, Shanice Parker, Racine McGregor, Georgia Hale, especially come to mind. I did say the bench were all on debut, but Tyler Nathan Wong is a pretty good debutante to have. Like, she's just really good at footy. She's played for Aotearoa 5 different codes of footy, pretty much. And she is someone who can come off the bench and play hooker. She can play in the halves. She's got a nice left foot kicking game, and she's like her, Nichols, Georgia Hale, Parker, like their classes and how they just always show up, like a Richie McCaw type of presence, or theme of the weekend, Sam Cane type of presence, where you just always show up. You're always there when you're needed, and you just never really stop, as well as the skill and the execution of your role. So that was really good. But the debutantes were also pretty good, and I do think it's hard to win these type of games when you have so many debutantes, but those debutantes showed positive signs. LeSean Albert Jones left the field during the game, so then Jasmine Fogger-Vinnie's making her debut. She plays a lot of minutes on the edge. Najvada George came off the bench. Amelia Pasakala came off the bench. All of them were on debut, so the whole bench was on debut, and they all played over 30 minutes. I think Pasakala was the only one to play less than 40 minutes because there was mayhem as far as HIAs, injuries, all of that stuff going on, all of which left me really impressed with the Kiwi Ferns in a loss, because they could have crumbled. They basically crumbled in the World Cup final last year against Australia. They were I think they only lost by 2 or 4 points in the pool game against Australia. Then they got 50 put on them in the final. This game, at halftime, it was looking like it could be a massive win to Australia once again. But the Kiwi Ferns, with all their injuries, with all their debutants, and just the niggle they were facing, made it a contest. And I think that's pretty impressive, because moving forward, you are going to have a lot of debutants for the Kiwi Ferns because there's so much rugby league talent on the women's side. But I think it might be 1 or 2 debutants as opposed to 6 or 8 debutants, which is what we've had over the last few years. And I think this is a really solid performance to build upon for the Kiwi Ferns moving forward.
Yeah, I got 3 ideas on that. One big one that I'll save to after I get the 2 little ones out. The first little one is actually nothing to do with that, but just realizing, looking at your profile pic there, which also does include, is that Lockie Ferguson with the football?
Yeah.
Speaking of cross code stuff, I'd imagine Trent Bolt would be pretty decent at football, but we know who the best footballing black cap was. It's Chatham Cup winner Adam Milne. So, but also just like to point out that we did just talk about, for a brief little aside, but about black caps as rugby players without mentioning Daryl Mitchell, whose dad coached the All Blacks. So I think he must have he's got a little bit of pedigree himself. I don't know what he did, but
Well, it's like saying Michaela Foster's good at rugby because her dad's the All Blacks coach. So that's a bit of a stretch, you know. Like,
she might be though.
but you're making an assumption. Tim Southey
Well,
played
yeah,
first
maybe
15 rugby.
yeah.
Daryl Mitchell might have played as well. I don't know. Who cares? Let's keep moving.
The other point is, do you know what the 5 sports that Tyler Nathan Wong has played are? Because I was imagining, like we know that league is the 5th one. She's obviously played union and sevens. I'm guessing touch rugby would
I
probably
think
be
it's
another one.
tag and touch.
Tag and touch. There we go. The tag is the one I was trying to figure out. What's the other code that would be out there? I didn't know what it was. Good to know. That's an absolutely insane record, by the way.
I will say, like, Kane Williamson, I'm not sure if anyone out there gets this. I don't have a lot of like pop culture, TV show, movie references. That's not my shtick. But Kane Williamson's hand does look a lot like this dude of Sons of Anarchy, who I think he must have got like his hand chopped off and he was just rolling around with some like plastic hand that was just a permanent bandage. And I was like, saw that Kane Williamson thing and I was like, that looks familiar. And then I realized there was some obscure character of Sons of Anarchy. So yeah, I'll take my advice and just let's keep it moving.
Yeah, well, the other thing, I guess, with the number of debutantes, the Kiwi Ferns, is one of those things where if you don't play that often, by the time you do play again, like you're getting. Last year was a World Cup year, so there's been a little bit more momentum. But then before that, there was very limited program for a couple of years, and when you don't. Even if you're just getting 1 tour a year, I think there's always going to be a few debutants because you're leaving it so long between games that there's going to be players coming through. But I think because a lot of the stuff is what I've been thinking about a lot with the football ferns and how the development of players, the international team just picks who's doing the best for their club teams. The development happens at club level. That's where you're training all the time. And the growth and constant expansion of the NRLW it's still in a phase where it's like it's being set up, it's not in a consistent sort of shape yet. It's still growing out and expanding. It's in the sort of sapling form rather than it's not yet a fully bloomed I don't know, oak tree or whatever. That's probably something that the Kiwi Ferns will just have to deal with for a couple of years. Is it's going to be a thing where there's like a little bit of instability in who they can pick and who's available. And as it gets settled up and the season gets longer and, getting a Warriors team in there will probably help things as well. Same as a Phoenix team is certainly help the football. Well, I don't know if it's helped the football Ferns yet, but it's going to when those players have progressed far enough in their careers, haven't gotten a start with the Phoenix. We're getting there. It seems like with the Kiwi Ferns, that is quite inextricably linked, I would say, with the state of NRLW, which is moving towards something rather than having arrived at that destination yet. So the Kiwi Ferns are probably going to have a bit of that going on. But I mean, that's the process. That's the journey. That's what they want to be doing. That's how they want to be, traveling. That is all moving in the right direction. So that's nothing to worry about, but good to hear that second half in particular locked it down. Was meaning to watch that, but of course it's the National League season at the moment, so I can't waste time watching stuff that I'm not going to write about. Although I did watch that All Blacks game because it's on in the morning.
I would like the debutantes were all fine, but
yeah,
Anessa Biddle. Last year she was in Auckland. Otara, like shout out South Auckland. Anessa Biddle from Otara, try scorer. Mele Hofunga from Mangere, try scorer, and so on. Anessa Biddle dominated NRLW in her first season. She was really good in her debut as well. And the players off the bench were all really good. It's like Leanne Tafunga's played 3 seasons of NRLW now. She was making her Kiwi Ferns debut. Alexis Tawaniai isn't a factor at the moment because I think she's injured. She is the 18-year-old from Wellington who was the Dragons' best player in NRLW this season. So I get your point, and I tend to always kind of push back on those type of ideas you throw out there, but I will add the Kiwi Ferns are in a really funky position because their new players from New Zealand, like the players who come from New Zealand to play NRLW, dominate NRLW. And then there's other players like the Fogavini and George. They came up through Australia, and they've played a few seasons now of NRLW. Brooke Anderson, the hooker, she was on debut, but she's played a few seasons of NRLW as well. And they all did a job against Australia, and that's the positive foundations to move forward off. So I was kind of sniffing an upset for this game. I was hoping for an upset. They will defeat Australia in the next 2 years. I do think that will happen. Speaking of the Wellington Phoenix,
Australia are on the same thing as well. With they're also quite obviously linked to the NRLW. I guess the point is that both these teams are going to get a lot better as well as this goes along.
Like the whole women's league thing's getting better, but I would say I don't think it's a certainty that Australia gets better because the expansion is opening up more slots for the Fijian players, the Papua New Guinea players, the Tongans and Samoans who didn't have World Cup teams last year. Now you've got those squads available, but also, again, the young players from Aotearoa dominated NRLW. So I don't think it's a certainty that Australia keeps getting better. I think there is low-hanging fruit off. I was going to say oak tree, but I don't think oak trees produce fruit. But there's low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging acorns.
There's low-hanging acorns for the Kiwi Ferns to enjoy because the players from Aotearoa are dominating NRLW, which is pretty exciting. Wellington Phoenix, they had a 1-0 loss to Melbourne City. Pretty good performance from my untrained eye for the Phoenix women in their first game. I just want to throw it out there. Like I do, who's McNamara for City?
Holly McNamara?
Yeah, she's all good. Like
she's a very good footballer, so she is.
Well, she's right. I like her matchup though, and I don't want to get like a negative straight out of the gate, but Davidson, the right back, is she a Kiwi?
No, she's one of the American imports.
Yeah, thank God. I don't know what she's up to. Like she had no idea whether it was McNamara, whether it was someone else. She had no idea where they were on defense. She'd be like 1-on-1, and then she's drifting over here. It's 2-on-1. The Phoenix are 2 defenders on 1 player, whether it was McNamara or someone else. Davidson drifts over there. She throws it into the opposition. I'm not a fan of Davidson. Like maybe she'll get better, but she was like, shout out to McNamara because I did get the vibe. Yeah, McNamara, she's classy, she's good. But I also saw, like, compared to Foster at left back, Davidson is half as good as Foster. And another observation, we've gone, I don't know what the Aotearoa scale is. We've gone from C to fully blown Pahutakawa as far as the stepovers go. Like a couple of months ago, we were just looking for a player with a stepover. Now, we've got Grace Jale scoring bangers. We've got attacking players doing great things around the world and in the A-League. And then you go to the Phoenix, whether they're Kiwis or not, because the Venezuelan, she's not a Kiwi.
Speckmeyer. Hope Breslin as well, American. She's got stepovers.
Breslin is really slow. I'm not a great fan of her as well. But the Speckmeyer stepovers.
First game for the imports, we'll see.
Yeah, underwhelming to be honest. Like even
because the keeper also made a bit of a mistake. The keeper I think was quite good. Riley Foster was pretty good for the most part, but also the goal did come because she didn't parry the ball to the side. She parried it back down the middle, and Hannah Wilkinson was going to pounce on that all day long.
Like Speckmeyer did some stepovers, but most of her stepovers led to turnovers.
Yeah, she's
And I was
quick
like,
though.
well,
That's a pretty
yeah,
handy
I'm
thing.
just saying, like,
And
we're
she looks like she's got a bit of a press, but
yeah,
yeah, on the
yeah.
ball, the quality wasn't quite there
I'm
yet, but
just
she has
saying,
been injured.
regardless of what happened, we've gone from no step overs in attacking funk in women's football in Aotearoa to the whole realms of women's football from Aotearoa. Ample step overs, goals, assists, attacking flair, attacking funk, which is pretty cool. But back to the Wellington Phoenix context, those were my observations. I thought it was like a solid performance. It was gritty, it was tough. They created chances. Melbourne City didn't take as many chances as they should have, but neither did the Phoenix. The Phoenix created chances but couldn't score. And I think it's a positive performance to set up their season. Similar vibe to the Kiwi Ferns, I believe.
Yeah, and similar in another way because, like as you said before, the last time the Kiwi Ferns played Australia was a World Cup final, wasn't it? And they got smoked. Like, what have the Phoenix done against Melbourne City specifically? What did they like last season? They played Melbourne City in the first game of the season at home. Exactly the same fixture as this year. Last season they lost 4-1. This season they lost 1-0 and had chances to maybe get something out of it. Again, like, yeah, Hannah Wilkinson missed a couple good chances. There was some good saves. Like, City could have scored more. They were a little bit rusty to start the season, but they'd also, I think, had like a 3-0 preseason win against Melbourne Victory in their most recent sort of friendly fixture as well. So, like, City can score goals. City are a pretty good team. I don't think the Victory are as good as they've been in the last few years. You know, losing Claudia Bunge will do that to you, but um, City should be there or thereabouts around the top of the table. We're not expecting the Phoenix to come out week one and be the best team in the A League. You know, they're the same as a lot of these other teams we're talking about. Like, there is a level of progress that has to happen. It takes a bit of time. You know, you got to get your confidence up as much as also the tactics and technique stuff you worked on in the preseason. You still need to be able to see that work to get things rolling. And the Phoenix, yeah, would have been nice if they snuck a point out of that game. I think they were good enough to be in the realms to where they could have, whether they deserved it or not. They were good enough to give themselves a chance. Yeah, some of the end quality from the imports was a bit disappointing because I think Speckmeyer's crossing was quite bad and Davidson didn't get high enough to put in good deliveries as I would have hoped. Admittedly, she had one of the like, she won't have to face Holly McNamara every week. Like, she is one of the better A-League players. And first game of the season for all of them, first game in a new team, like, it'll take a few weeks to settle.
I do like, if you put Foster at right back, McNamara is just regular.
Well, I was surprised they signed a right back because Marissa Vandermeer can play right back. She always was a right back up until playing centre back for the Phoenix last year, but she was really good at centre back, and they kind of needed her at CB because she's their best in like winning headers, and they were getting beaten by a few crosses, so they needed someone who could get up there and win some headers. We like, you can see the proof of that in how she scored a few goals last year. It's specifically attacking corners from Michaela Foster. Clearly she's good in the air there. She's just as good defensively, wins a few headers there. And Mackenzie Barry is just one of the best tacklers in the A-League. So the on-the-ground stuff. And she was the right-sided centre-back, so she helped a fair bit getting across and helping cover with McNamara in that threat. But, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to get something tangible out of it because it feels like there's a very good team in there, and I expect them to be pretty good this season. I kind of think they're going to finish higher up than the men will, for starters, which seems a weird thing to say about a team that's finished last twice in a row. But you know, the men might be last this year, so it's hard to say. We genuinely don't know what to expect from them because they're leaning so much on players who don't have much A-League experience that it's not that they won't be good. It's just that we don't know if they will be good or not. This Phoenix women's team should be pretty good. I would hope they're competing, whether they make it or not. I would hope they're competing for top 6 by the end of the season. They will have easier games than this. I think this was a pretty solid performance. First sort of glimpse of some of the different things that Paul Temple's got them doing. He's talked a bit about what he calls small ball, which is like lots of short passes, and you did see a fair bit of that. I think that's why Macy Fraser got the start. I was surprised by that, but then I thought also she was really good. A lot of she's someone who can play in tight spaces, clever passer, good awareness of what's around her, and also has step overs. Macy Fraser definitely is center midfielder with step overs. That is, she's got that. And towards the end of the game, you started to see her throwing in a few more. I won't say selfish moves, but looking to create for herself a little bit more. Where and earlier on she had been just trying to facilitate things. Where it's at least one time where she tried to cross the ball into Speckmeyer, where it's like there's an open shot there for you. Just take it on. And she did sort of take it on a bit more in the latter stages. So I thought that was very promising from Fraser. But I'm not sure how their midfield will work because it looks like Kate Taylor's going to be the CDM, as sort of was teased in preseason. I thought she did pretty solid there as well. I think that at this stage in her career, I think it's quite an interesting little move for her. But Annalie Longo didn't play. There's your best position player. She's struggling with an injury and missed the first game. Grace Wisniewski was on the bench, so it was Chloe Knott and Macy Fraser starting in midfield. And that would, a debutant and also Knott, who is probably better with her off the ball stuff than on the ball. She has developed a lot with her passing, playing in the A-League, but I think she's someone who can spray a pass here or there, or doesn't necessarily lead the tempo. She's a bit more of a the energy is where it comes from with her. Curious how they work on that moving forward, because I think Wisniewski needs to play bigger, starter level minutes, but also I liked what Fraser offered, and I respect what they got going with Chloe Knott, who makes the team better around her by working as hard as she does. And Longo has to be playing as much as possible when she's available, because she's probably the most talented, certainly the most decorated player in the squad. So the midfield is going to be a little bit of a funky one, how they balance those minutes. But I think the other player to mention only got 45 minutes, and I expect that was the sort of Speckmeyer's only good for half a game because she's been dealing with injuries and I think also illness. They said she had an infected insect bite during preseason, which I'm hoping that happened on the Australian leg of the preseason rather than the New Zealand leg of the preseason. Although she did go away with Venezuela for a tour at one point, so who knows? So she only played the second half, and I think that's probably probably why Mania Elliott comes in and starts on the left wing, plays half a game, and then gets subbed off. Not because she was playing badly, but just because that was sort of a prearranged thing, is how they're going to do it. Mania Elliott is playing at the under-17 World Cup last year. She actually captained the under-17 World Cup team as a fullback more than anything, although I think she started to play a bit more further forward. Certainly after the World Cup, when she came back to play for Auckland United, she is from the Waikato. She played Melville, I think, growing up, but she moved to Auckland United for the National League season last year, played as a right winger, having sort of been a fullback and captain for the youth team. And she's not someone who has step overs. It's don't expect the step over tricky stuff from Mania Elliott. What you get from her is bulldozing runs. She's not very big, but she's strong, and she'll just charge, and she's pretty clever. There was a nice little shift to the ball to beat a defender at one point, make a burst up the line. She had a good game in the first game of the season for the Phoenix Reserves in the National League. She's 18 years old, so the youngest player on the field in that, and that certainly for the Phoenix anyway, in that game. She's only on a scholarship deal as well. Was not expecting her to play. Then she started, and then I thought she played pretty well as well. And she did score a goal in one of their preseason games, so I think she's certainly a player to keep a close eye on. They did have a wide defender last year on a scholarship deal who's also from the Waikato region, and Michaela Foster, who ended up playing every single game. So there is a bit of precedence there for a scholarship player coming and do some good things. Mania Elliott following in on that legacy.
To be clear, whether it's step overs, whether it's anything else, just want goals. So it's how
attack and funk,
Yeah, attack and funk, and step overs or bulldozing runs.
They're pretty cool too.
Yes.
When you see the old 50-50s with the shoulders and the smaller player barges over the bigger player, that's a pretty cool thing.
The All Whites. The All Whites a couple of days away from the Socceroos, which might be
tomorrow morning.
Is that tomorrow
or Wednesday morning? I forget which.
If it's either one, we might discuss it on the subscriber podcast and give a more timely recap of what happened. kind of split us between the Congo game.
Wednesday morning, yeah.
Yeah, so split us between the Congo game and kind of setting up the Socceroos game. What happened against Congo and take us into? Is there anything from the draw, 1-1 draw, for anyone who didn't know, against Congo that we can take forward into the Socceroos encounter?
Yeah, I mean, just the confidence of getting a decent result against a solid team is pretty handy. It was a 1-1 draw that should have been a 0-0 draw, because I think the Congo didn't create a lot. They started quite brightly, but once the All Whites settled into their work, it was a different story. And Congo mostly only really threatening from long shots, but they did score 21 seconds into the second half because Kakache played a back header to Nick Zanev, who was in goal, and Zanev didn't come out and claim it. It was just miscommunication. And I think Pinecker also should have been a little bit more alert at trying to block off the runner coming through. And really sloppy goal to concede. It's always sloppy to concede within 30 seconds of a half starting. That was even sloppier than usual. Normally, it does take a mistake to concede inside the first minute. Like, no team's able to break you down that quickly. Disappointing how that worked, because I think they would have been feeling pretty good about themselves with how they built into the first half and was starting to get going. And then suddenly they're playing from behind and having to chase the game, and they played all right. I don't think it was vintage. I think their attacking stuff was pretty good when Sarpreet Singh had the ball. Not so good when he didn't have the ball, but beautiful to have Sarpreet Singh back. Like, the thing I noticed straight away is how when he gets the ball, he's looking to get it to Chris Wood. Like, he's specifically trying, how do I get the big man involved here? It's like, that's just that pipeline, It's so important to have that when you've got a Premier League striker like Chris Wood, who is not a Premier League striker like, I don't know who a good example would be, Son Heung-min or Mohamed Salah, or someone who creates their own stuff. Wood just feeds on the service you give him. So you got to get him service, right? You got to get him the ball. Sarpreet Singh was looking to do that straight away. Lovely that connection. And he looks sharp for someone who hasn't been playing a lot. It's a pretty handy player. I still kind of think that if he had been available for that Costa Rica game, we might well have won that and we could have gone to the World Cup. I think he was the biggest difference, on top of the fact that it was just an inexperienced All Whites team. But that inexperienced All Whites team against Costa Rica was guys who were around about there's that core of the team who had come through the Under-20 World Cup, who came through the Olympics, who are now in the core of the All Whites. Those guys were on about 10 caps when they were playing against Costa Rica. The Costa Rica had like 4 guys in that game with 100 caps. They've been to multiple World Cups. They knew exactly what they were doing and how to win a game when they're not playing that well. The All Whites don't know how to win a game when they're not playing well. Those guys just haven't been there to do that yet. However, those guys with 10 caps then are now in like 15 to 20 cap range now and moving onwards. They're no longer international rookies. They're starting to get there. They've all had another year of developing their club career, some more than others, but all of them to some extent. We're getting to the point now where, like, I remember saying on the podcast last week ahead of the game, we're not where the All Whites need to win every game, but we are where we need to start seeing them win some games. Get the odd result here or there. The fact that they the way it happened, I think the penalty was pretty soft. I thought, I'm not saying Chris Wood dived. I'm saying that it was a level of contact where I'm not sure that was given a foul consistently throughout the game. However, it was given a foul on this occasion, came about because of a smart bit of work from Matt Garberton taking a quick free kick from a position where I don't think many people would have been brave enough to take a quick free kick because it's in shooting range. Normally, you're thinking, well, if I take it quickly, it might lead to nothing. If I don't take it quickly, we'll at least definitely get a shot away. And the conservative option is always to look for the shot, just for the dead ball situation. Garbett rushes it quickly, Wood wins a penalty. Like, it's just a little moment of chaos that they were able to create, and it earned them a point. Those little moments within a game are crucial. They also had a little moment the other way where they conceded that stupid goal. So it balanced it out, and that's why they drew and didn't win. But, I mean, the way they came back in that, I think there's a lot to be gained. I think that's a point earned. It's not a point earned because it's a friendly game. You don't get any points for it, but it's a result where they were able to avoid defeat in a way where that's going to come in handy if they know they can do that. Against a pretty solid Congo team, who's the strength of their team was around like Chancellor Mbemba and in the centre back. Their defence was really strong. They marshaled Chris Wood pretty well. They're always getting something out of that is pretty nice and gives them some decent confidence going into that Aussie game. You know, Aussie just played against England at Wembley. They played their best team for that. England did not play their best team. England won 1-0. Australia might rotate. They might not. I'm not sure. I think New Zealand do, though, have a couple, like Crocombe will come back in. That'll be handy. I don't know how much else will change from one game to the next, but I'm excited for how that will go. I think we got a chance to turn them over, you know.
National League football. If you can do a couple of big things quickly, otherwise, what's your biggest thing from the weekend in National League football? Top of mind on a Monday that you are thinking about from National League football?
Well, it's the windiest round of games I've ever seen. And probably because a lot of games were in Wellington at a time where it just it's been windy around the country lately, and Wellington always takes that further. So there were a few of those games that were just affected by the wind. I don't know if you saw Scott Basale's assist for Wellington Olympic, just hoofing the ball downfield. It goes over the top of everyone, bounces once, Gianni Bazookas, boom, there we go, 1-0 to Olympic. That sets up what I think might be the most interesting aspect of the men's league. I might leave the women's league for now because I got a couple games still to watch, so I'm behind on that. Although the most interesting thing from that was the Wellington Phoenix game, because I think you saw for the first time that women's Phoenix first team players were like because their first team was on, they sort of have a squad and they know what they're doing with that. Therefore, the players who played in that game were the players who didn't play in the other game. So everyone was getting minutes kind of thing across the board, which is a nice, handy thing to have. So McMeekin scored an absolute screamer in that game. But Kelly Brown also played. Mickey Robertson also played. Daisy Brazendale, another one of their scholarship players, played. I think the only players who didn't get minutes were the backup goalkeepers this week, and also Olivia Ingham and Annalie Longo, because they're both injured. So the big thing from the men's thing, I don't know. It's like no one's pulling away with it. Auckland City are, because Auckland City have had 2 comeback wins in a row, but Auckland City haven't played that well in any of these games. The fact they've got 12 points out of 12 is because they're Auckland City and they know how to do that. And they've had, they just score these late goals when they need them. They're wild. But Wellington Olympic have had to come from behind to get a couple draws in a row. Christchurch United were beaten this week by Manurewa, getting their first win of the season, their first points of the season, I think. So getting Rewa off the foot of the table with a big upset win down in Christchurch against the Rams there. And Auckland United had a 1-0 win, grinding it out against Petone. Didn't play amazing, but they're defensively very good. Eastern Suburbs still haven't won a game. They're the ones who drew with Wellington Olympics. So without playing that well, Auckland City have opened up a clear lead now at the top of the table, and look like they probably won't surrender that, although they do have, it's short season. There's tough fixtures all the time. They've got to play a couple of these other big teams. We'll see how they go against those teams. But Christchurch United and Wellington Olympic haven't quite been able to keep pace. And Auckland United just, I think, are now up to second with another win. They haven't lost, but they've got 8 points, 2 wins, 2 draws. But they've drawn against Christchurch United. They've drawn against Eastern Suburbs, I think, was the other game. So this battle for second place is a bit of a weird one right now, because no one's been able to put their hand up and say, yeah, this is us. Like, we're running away with it, which you can do in such a short season. You win 4 games in a row when you're on the roll. Auckland City, the only team who've been able to do that so far. There's only 5 weeks to go on top of this, so it'll be funky how that goes. And some of these teams, Wellington Olympic are one of them, Christchurch United, they might need to beat Auckland City in order to get the chance to play Auckland City in the grand final. It might well come down to that, where I think Olympic play them in the second to last round, so that'll be wild. But that's where we're at with the National League. It's closer than I thought it was going to be,
We'll be back on Wednesday for our subscriber podcast. And, of course, back on Thursday with another Niche Cast podcast for your Kiwi sporting needs. Big up yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.